And welcome back to an episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're hosts Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael, for the first time in over 7 months, we have actual football to discuss. So let's waste no time and just hop right into it. Your initial reaction to the Jets' opening preseason game of 2021, where they won 12-7 against the New York Giants. A good performance all around. Zach Wilson's debut seems like a pretty positive debut for Robert Saleh's Jets.
Yeah, there was a lot positive to take out of this game. I feel like a lot of the things that we hope to see actually did end up happening. It's preseason, you take everything with a grain of salt, but I think it is more applicable than what we have been reacting to, the training camp practices and scrimmages. It definitely means more than that. So, you find that middle ground to where it doesn't, it's not a perfect indication of what's going to happen in the future, but it is worth something. And it's definitely better to see positive than negative. And there were quite a few positives in this game.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, and most of the Giant starters weren't playing. But I think it's one of those things where if they do well, you can say, okay, let's downplay it a little bit. But if they do poorly, there's definitely room to criticize it. I mean, obviously, we would be on this podcast the next day, saying patient and, just preseason, whatever. But the fact that they didn't play poorly is a good thing. So that is what you can kind of take away from it. They took care of business. They looked a hell of a lot more organized and a better team than the Giants, even if they were playing their backups. But the Jets backups look better than the Giants backups. So they took care of business. Like you said, week one of the preseason doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of things, but still a good sign. I think obviously Zach Wilson is what we should open it up with because it was his debut. That was the biggest storyline about the game. All 5 rookie quarterbacks had their debuts this weekend. For the most part, all 5 of them looks pretty good. But I think you and I mean, you don't want to be biased here, but I would say Zach Wilson had among one of the better performances out of the 5. What stood out to you in his debut as a member of the New York Jets?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just the consistency of the decision making and the comfort in the offense. That you and I both rewatched all of his plays from that game, and it's a small sample. It's not something to overreact to. It's literally 2 drives and 10 dropbacks, I believe. So that's a quarter of a game, but he looked really comfortable, and I think that's what's most important. Sure, he didn't have some of the highlight reel plays that some of the other quarterbacks had. But he also didn't really have any bad mistakes, whereas all of the other quarterbacks, other than probably Mac Jones, made their share of pretty big mistakes. Wilson only had 3 incompletions in this game, and there was a miscommunication. There was Tyler Croft totally stumbling on a route, completely missing an opportunity to catch the ball, and Corey Davis kind of getting jammed on a route. None of them were inaccurate or bad decisions.
The one in the red zone to Corey Davis, what Michael and I, when we watched it, said, I mean, we'll talk about this in a second about maybe the leash he was playing on, but there was room to maybe scramble and get the first down or dump it off to Ty Johnson. That would be the one play I would say you could maybe have some criticism. It's very light criticism. The other 2, like you said, don't deserve any.
Yeah, and just the fact that we can point out his worst play as, maybe he should have scrambled and dumped it off instead of trying a slant route that was, incomplete, but it wasn't anything egregious. He was consistent in control. His accuracy was great. His ball placement on the intermediate and short throws he was trying was mostly perfect for the most part. It was a, small number of throws, so it's not necessarily that hard to be perfect on 6, 7 throws, but with what he had, he did about as good as he definitely could. And the decision making is the most important part. There was, other than that one play, he was making the right reads within what you could see in the broadcast view. He was throwing it to the right guy, making the right decision, and he was doing it quickly and decisively. So the Jets did a nice job kind of setting the table for him nicely with good pass protection, getting the ball out fairly quickly. And he did exactly what he needed to do. He looked very comfortable out there.
Right. I think, obviously he looked in command. The thing that you can say about him and Mac Jones, and look, there was a certain Twitter account, I won't say who got a lot of criticism for saying that Mac Jones oozes the confidence of a 10-year NFL veteran. It's ridiculous to say after your first after one preseason game. But I think the thing that you can say is in their first preseason game, both Mac Jones and Zach Wilson looked the calmest out of all the rookie quarterbacks. Like Sam Darnold is going into his fourth year, and there was never really a time where I saw him relaxed in the pocket. He always looked like he was just, there was a million things going on in his head. Zach Wilson looked in command. There were plenty of times where you just saw him. He looked at the safeties, identified the coverage, good post-snap recognition, knew what was going to be open, and delivered it with a lot of zip and pop. I mean, you can really see it on the television. I haven't had the privilege of seeing it in person, but the ball just explodes out of his hand. He really does have that Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes type of release, which is not everything, but it is, an amazing skill to have, and it does make a difference. I would say the biggest thing that stood out to me, and I tweeted this out, and this was most notable on the 3rd and 14 play where the Jets, by the way, if that's Adam Gase last year, that's a halfback drop the middle. We're going to punt the ball and play field position. So I like that the Jets actually ran a passing concept there, and one that went for 13 yards, even if it was a little bit of wasn't a dump off, but it was a shorter pass. What I love about that play, and one of the things that we talked about going into this game based off the green and white scrimmage, was there were a few plays in the green and white scrimmage where Michael and I were watching the reps and some pressure came. Wilson did exactly what Sam Darnold's done a little bit sometimes, where he tries to throw off his back foot and utilize all that arm talent, which is great. But if you can't play from the pocket, none of that matters. Patrick Mahomes' best moments have all come from these, not all, but most of them have come from out of the pocket, making something out of nothing, crazy arm angle off any platform, whatever. But if he wasn't able to be an efficient quarterback in the pocket, he would be extremely one-dimensional and defenses would figure him out. But he's a good quarterback from the pocket. So that was one of the things that he didn't face much of a rush at BYU. I mean, he had a lot of time back there, and there were a few times where he bailed on some open pockets. In the NFL, you can't do that. And on that 3rd and 14, there's a bit of a pass rush. Both tackles do a good job of pushing the edge rushers, vertically. But Zach Wilson has to step up there. He has to step up into a murky pocket and take a hit. But he does just that. I mean, there are so many times over the last decade, and I even tweeted out there was a clip of Trevor Lawrence doing the same thing, where they either keep continuously just drifting backwards and throwing off their back foot, or we've seen Darnold do this a lot, where he takes his eyes down, off the field and tries to, navigate the pocket. Zach Wilson navigated the pocket without looking. He just effortlessly just slid up the pocket. His feet were set and delivered a nice ball and give the Jets a chance on 4th and 1. I thought that was the most impressive part to me, because we knew he had the zip. We know he's an accurate guy. We know he's a smart guy. But that was one of the things that, it's one rep in a preseason game. But if that's something that he can continue out throughout the season, I have no doubt in my mind Zach Wilson's going to be successful. If he can operate in the pocket under pressure, he's going to have a damn good rookie season. I think the other thing that was fantastic to watch, and again, it's a preseason game, but in some ways that should make it more exciting, was the Jets had a competent offense. I mean, they looked like they were running a 21st century offense, which they haven't in, a long time, I should say. They were moving the ball well. And when it gets more exotic in the regular season, because this is their vanilla package, the Jets are going to run more motion, more screens, more trick. They're going to sauce it up a little bit. They're going to get Elijah Vera-Tucker and Elijah Moore back. So the offenses supposedly should look better. Obviously, they won't be going up against, Giants backups, but I thought the concepts they ran and the passing concepts they built off of the run were extremely encouraging. They did a lot of things that were taking easy yards and setting up Zach Wilson for success. What did you think about Mike LaFleur's first time calling plays in a long time since the beginning of his career? What did you think of Mike LaFleur's first performance?
Well, like you said, I think the biggest thing is that it's probably going to be expanded upon even more once we get to the real thing. But we definitely got to see some glimpses of what this offense is going to look like. We saw some of the orbiting motion from the wide receivers. We saw a very run heavy approach, which, may or may not be because of this being Zach Wilson's debut. Could be they may run this heavy once the regular season arrives. But either way, it feels like they're going to be a fairly above average run heavy team, because that's what the basis of this passing game is, building that respect off of the run game. So you can suck the linebackers in on those play action fakes and create space on rollouts, bootlegs, even just from the pocket, which we saw a lot of in this game. So it was definitely impressive. Like you said, it's modern. It looks like what you watch when you flip on any other NFL game. Play action, motion, just a lot of creativity and trying to find ways to create natural advantages for the players, rather than what we've seen with these recent Jets offenses, particularly Adam Gase, where there's not a lot of matchup advantage creation. He's
Right.
mostly just kind of playing straight up and saying, go beat your man, which if you have the 2015, 24 or 2014, 2013 Broncos, that can work. But if you have a quarterback in Sam Darnold who's trying to develop, great receivers, great O-line, you got to be able to help them out. And that's most teams in the league. That's just the league today. You got to create advantages. So much of the production and the big plays in this league are not to take anything away from the players, but schemed up just because the coaches do a great job of putting them in a position to succeed. And the Jets haven't had coaches that do that. Now it seems like they do. But I do want to talk about that one play with Wilson that you're mentioning. I think that's definitely the biggest play for him in this game, because it wasn't, the throw itself obviously wasn't great. It was it was as good as you would want to be. It just wasn't an amazing throw because Croft is wide open. But it's just the fact that Wilson was willing to step up into the pressure, throw through the pressure, and not, awkwardly try to avoid it and throw it sidearm or whatever. It's great that he can do those things, but like you said with Patrick Mahomes, those are the highlight plays that make him elevate him from good to special, because he can make those plays in positions where other quarterbacks have to throw it away, take a sack. That's where those tools come into play. But you don't want to always have to do that. You want to be able to step up into the pocket and make throws while you take a hit, because that's how you throw accurately under pressure. You have to be able to, you can throw the ball the same way as you normally would. You just have to be willing to take a hit to do that. And that's what Sam Darnold really struggled with. I think one of the biggest reasons he didn't pan out with the Jets, one of the biggest things he has to fix if he's going to turn his career around, is he has to be willing to hang in the pocket and just take hits and throw normally, because he would fade away. He would throw, try to throw from awkward angles. He'd try to escape the pocket, and he would miss a lot of plays that way. But Wilson, it's just literally one throw, but it's definitely probably the biggest question with him coming out of BYU with those big pockets against not great teams, that he had a lot of space. So to see him in this game, Feeny gets absolutely wrecked on this play, one of many plays in which he did.
Yeah, 4th and 1 as well.
Yeah, that one as well. And, he's forced to step up into Dan Feeney's, the pressure allowed by him, and he delivers a throw with perfect routine mechanics and gives Tyler Kroft a ball in stride that he nearly takes upfield to convert on 3rd and 14. So it was great to see that. That was definitely his most impressive play, just from a poise standpoint in the pocket.
Yeah, and I mentioned to you this to you before the podcast, but how many, if you look at Sam Darnold's highlights, not to keep beating a dead horse here, but they play him week 1, so I think we can rag on Sam Darnold throughout the season. Mostly week 1, we'll let him go throughout the season. And once the Jets use that pick, it's over. We'll stop talking about Sam Darnold. But how many of Sam Darnold's highlights can you name that are from the pocket? There's not many. I mean, there's, like you mentioned, I think he had the 2 touchdowns against the Broncos. There, you mentioned, I think he had 1 throw to Berrios this year. His first touchdown to Robbie Anderson, maybe. But I mean, you think of all his best plays, the one that keeps getting posted against the Niners to Braxton Berrios, the one to Berrios against the Colts, the one in Baltimore against Jamison Crowder. It all comes outside of the pocket, him kind of rolling out and finding something, playing that backyard football. That backyard football is great and all, but if you can't, like you said, if you can't operate from the pocket, it's worthless in a sense. Maybe it's not worthless, but you're never going to take that next step. And
yeah,
I think
that's the majority of the game. I think that's the biggest thing, because you get those opportunities now and then, but most of the game is, even today, is still pocket passing. So you got to be able to do it.
And it comes down to not just as that, it's funny because Darnold was always touted having that innate feel, but it comes down to also trusting your eyes and that post-snap processing of understanding. I mean, part of the reason Zach Wilson looked in command and Darnold didn't is you could tell Darnold looked visibly confused at times about what the defense was doing. If you are again, it's preseason. I have to keep making these caveats so, we don't read, 10 comments about stop overreacting. But if you read a defense and you understand what to do, like I think it was a 3rd and 6 to Corey Davis is a good example. I don't know necessarily about the stepping up, but just good recognition, because I was looking at the NFL page of that post on YouTube. They posted all of his throws, and I was reading some of the comments, and somebody said, "Oh, he stares down the receiver there. You can't do that in the regular season," something like that. And if you look at it Wilson pretty much doesn't take his eyes off Davis once he locks onto him. But if you go back and you really watch the play, you can see that he looks at the safeties and he realizes it's man coverage. And because it's man coverage, he knows that Davis is going to have leverage here. He's just got to hit him on this timing route. So he looks at him the entire play, but he understands what's happening. He trusts his eyes. That goes hand in hand with being a good pocket passer. Is you have to be, your football IQ has to be fairly high. Your processing has to be high, because if you trust it, you're willing to step in the pocket and take the hit because you know that something is going to get open. If you know what you're looking at is going to happen. Darnold never trusted himself, and that's why he always felt the need to bail and buy time, and maybe you can make some play outside of the designed play calling. I think the Jets did a really nice job, and it's a good sign. Again, it's one more time, it's preseason. I think they did a good job of doing exactly what Robert Saleh said they were going to do when they picked Zach Wilson, of we're going to lift you, not the other way around. Zach Wilson, I don't know if he was instructed before the game or if it was just in the play calling, did not play hero ball. I mean, it was, like you said, a very run-heavy approach. They built passing plays off of it. But it maybe before the game, they really emphasized staying in the pocket and making those plays. But it was a lot of quick reads, route combos that work together. They did a really nice job of just making the game plan as easy as possible for him. And, it's yet to be determined if Michael Flores is anything close to his brother or Kyle Shanahan. But Kyle Shanahan, like you were saying, if you compare him to Adam Gase, is a master at exploiting matchups and running stuff in the first quarter and then building a concept that builds right off of that, but attacks the weakness of that play in the third quarter. I mean, he's just, the way he calls a game is like 4D chess, and Adam Gase was playing, checkers. I was trying to Connect Four. That was the game I was trying to think of. I mean, they're just playing two completely different sports is what it looked like to the naked eye. So if the Jets have anything close to that, Zach Wilson is in great hands. The other thing, and before we move on from Zach Wilson, I mean, I guess it's not necessarily negative, because it's, maybe we shouldn't have the expectations for Zach Wilson to be sky high or something, but the media coverage has been absolutely brutal about this game and about Zach Wilson in general, because he's had 2 bad practices, and the narrative is now that Zach Wilson has sucked at training camp. And then, of course, there's the unnamed Twitter account, the same one that says Mac Jones oozes the confidence of a 10-year vet, which is a bit ridiculous and hyperbolic, but at the same time, I got the what he was saying. Zach Wilson had that same effect, and it's a quiet debut for him. And it's just like, then you look at Trevor Lawrence, who had a much worse game than Zach Wilson, even if he threw for, I think, like 8 more yards or something like that. If you go back and watch all 5 of the rookie performances, I think Wilson, look, he only played 2 series, but if you factor in everything, I think Wilson had among the better ones, like you said. Lance, I think, is going to be good, but he's still raw. He had some great plays and some bad plays. Mac Jones, I thought, was very good, although Wilson had a higher yards per attempt than him, a much higher yards per attempt than him. But Mac Jones just fits that Patriots offense so perfectly. I mean, I think, I wasn't as high on him, but in New England, I think he's just going to be, I think he'll be like a Kirk Cousins type of quarterback. Never amazing, but that's just pretty much all Bill needs. Justin Fields, had some, like Lance, some ups and downs, but some great ups. But the thing about him that ties back to what we're saying, and I guess I'll hand you the baton from here, is that all of Justin Fields' highlights, they came like Sam Darnold when the play broke down and making something out of nothing, which is great. But you didn't see Fields sit in the pocket, stick to the script, and, be an NFL quarterback that much. Again, I'm high on Justin Fields. Keep in mind, I'm not a Justin Fields basher. I'm just saying that's what is impressive to me about this Wilson performance. It's not flashy. Hell, okay, you want to call it quiet, but to me, it was impressive because it answered some of the concerns I have about him. Because I know that it's going to get ramped up. He's going to go, against, 4 quarters of a starting defense, and the pass rush is going to be there. And then he can start to make some of the Mahomes hero ball type of plays. But if he can do this stuff, he's in good hands.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm also a Justin Fields fan, and he did a lot of great stuff in that game, showed a lot of talent. But I think that's a good distinction that you make, that the main thing you want to see from these quarterbacks is, can they run an offense and be on schedule? Because I think, especially for first-round quarterbacks, the majority of them, they have special physical ability, the raw talent that they have that gives them that ceiling to where they can be a star quarterback, and plays like the ones Fields made, like the ones that Lance made, show you that potential. But at the end of the day, if you're going to stick for a long time, if you're going to be consistent throughout 4 quarters, throughout 17 games, almost said 16, then you're going to have to be able to run the offense on schedule. You're going to have to be able to throw passes into the flat accurately 90% of the time. You're going to have to be able to hit 15-yard outs 70% of the time plus. You're going to have to be able to throw the ball away when you need to throw the ball away. Just simple, easy stuff that you just have to be able to do very consistently and fluidly. And that's what Wilson showed. And I think Mac Jones showed as well. I think those two guys had the best debuts by far. Whereas Fields and Lance, I think both showed some awesome flashes, but they both had a fumble and they both had some dropped interceptions that were bad. And Lawrence, on the other hand, I think he made some nice throws and his decision making wasn't bad. But you and I both saw the same thing. He probably reacted worse to the pressure than any of these five quarterbacks. He had some bad reactions to the pressure, just with his footwork, kind of fading back and making throws, and just kind of being a little jittery and inaccurate against the pressure. So I think Wilson, Mac Jones definitely had the best debuts, and it's one game, could be the opposite order. Who played well next week? You don't know, but it is definitely, I think Wilson checked the right boxes in this first game.
The truth of the matter is that this quarterback class is ridiculous. And
yeah, it's a good class.
It's possible that they can all be good. The thing is that statistically, probably two of these guys are going to be busts. So everybody tries to figure out who it's going to be, and they try to bring somebody down. I thought all five of them had solid debuts. Lawrence, like you said, I think was, to me, maybe I don't want to even say least impressive, because I thought he did some nice things. Yeah, his footwork, needs some work, and he's not playing behind Clemson's offensive line. And, this is a guy who's been told he's been the second coming of Jesus Christ since he was like 12 years old. So I wouldn't be surprising to me if maybe he struggles, but I think they all five of them at this point in time have bright futures. We'll see how their careers develop. I don't love Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, but there's one play where they gave him 6 seconds in the pocket. And it's like, if Jacksonville can do that on a consistent basis, I mean, not consistent, but like a few times a game, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be all right. He also went up against a very good Browns defense, although it's preseason. But, the thing with Wilson is, I think this next week is going to be huge for him. One, he gets to practice alongside and against Aaron Rodgers. He just gets a different perspective. I think that because it's a practice and it's not a game setting where there's theoretically tape on the offense and Zach Wilson, because the Jets and Packers don't play each other, I think you're going to see a lot more regular season help me out here. Why am I completely blanking on the term?
Concepts.
Thank you. I was about to say complexes. I'm tired. I think you're going to see a lot more regular season concepts in the practices. In the game, it might go back to more vanilla preseason stuff. But look, Vera Tucker and Moore and Quinn Williams in the defense are all supposed to come back this next week. So it's a big week for the Jets. And yeah, he will be going up against more starters, against a better defense. So it's a test for him. But the first mission of Zach Wilson's career, he passed, is what I would say. Let's move on from him, because there's a ton to talk about. I'm sure he'll come up again and we'll spend another 10 minutes talking about him. In fact, I know that will happen. But let's move on to some of the other things that we noticed from this game. I think first and foremost, and it was Joe Douglas's mission statement when he first got here, which is that, you build this thing inside out, and this game is won in the trenches, which is such a cliche, but very few programs really follow that. I mean, that's part of the reason everybody talks about Belichick and Brady. This is why the Patriots are great. That's obviously a huge part of it, but they've had consistently great offensive lines throughout the last 2 decades, and defensive lines as well for the most part. But the Jets in a preseason game dominated the trenches. I mean, the Giants lost every battle in the trenches all night for the most part. I mean, between the offensive line outside of Dan Feeny and the defensive line especially, I mean, that all gas, no break mantra is for real. And they didn't even have arguably their best player in Quinn Williams. Pressure constantly all night. And, all three teams, first stringers, second stringers, and third stringers, and the offensive line did a great job in the run game. I felt like it seems like the zone blocking scheme really fits the players that they brought in. And I thought pass protection looked good as well. They gave clean pockets to all three quarterbacks. Michael, what did you think about the Jets winning in some trench warfare?
Yeah, it's definitely impressive. And I think the biggest thing with this is that you're playing the Giants backups, and it's preseason, it's small sample size. So
the Giants starting offensive line though played.
Yeah, their starting offensive line did though play, but still, I think but their starting offensive line is also very bad. So that's something that's also important.
Jets were one of the worst teams in all football, so we'll take any teams that were better than.
I think it's just at the end of the day, you'd like to have seen them take care of business in this game, and if they didn't, it would kind of be problematic. So it's less so an amazing performance, more like, okay, good, like they took care of business like you want them to. But at the same time, yeah, you just want to check the box. Like it's not necessarily impressive that Mekhi Becton dominates whoever he was blocking in this game, but if he didn't, then it would be a problem. So it's just taking care of business. But they were really dominant, I think, in both sides of the ball in the trenches. The first team offensive line was great, leading the run game to consistent chunk gains. That's the biggest thing. I think they didn't have a great YPC because they didn't have any huge runs, but they were consistently getting 3, 4, 7, 5. Just that's how you can run heavy offense when you're consistent like that. That's what's necessary, and they were doing that. And then the pass protection was great. Becton and Moses both allowed no pressures. Wilson wasn't hit or sacked a single time. So the first team offensive line was great, other than Dan Feeny, who was very, very bad. Had a big hand in a lot of big. The fourth down stop, he allowed that one. He allowed a couple of pressures on Wilson. So yeah, he's. I hesitate to even call him a good backup, even though he has starting experience. He's such a liability, but that's why he's backup. But other than that, offensive line was really good. McGovern had some great blocks. Javon Wesco had some really good ones. Other than the fourth down play,
Yeah, he did blow that.
He had an ugly whiff on that one. Fourth down plays just aren't his thing. If you remember back to the Cardinals game last year,
that's right.
But it was mostly good, and I think that there was a lot of positive to take away from the O-line. Then the D-line, obviously, missing Quinton Williams and was still dominant. Sheldon Rankins got it started with a dominant hit on the first drive of the game. He made their center look completely foolish. John Franklin Myers came off the edge, deflected a pass. 2 sacks for Huff. Jonathan Marshall had 2 half sacks.
Wait, let's just get the elephant in the room here. You predicted that Jonathan Marshall was going to get a sack, and I stupidly laughed in your face because for some reason I just missed the memo that he's no longer on the PUP list. I guess he was in that same wave when they took May off the PUP list on the first day of training camp, but I'd heard nothing about Jonathan Marshall, and I just assumed he wasn't practicing. So I stopped you and said, I don't think he's playing. I was wrong about that. And then, of course, Jonathan Marshall goes off for a sack and a half. So to our listeners and to Michael, I apologize. But it was pretty funny when he got a sack. I was like, oh, my God, he is playing.
Yeah, you sucked me right in. But to be fair, Jonathan, the reason that I thought he was going to get those 2 sacks or a sack was Jonathan Harrison on the Giants, former Jets center, and he didn't play either. So, and it was.
Does that mean he's a starter?
No, he's a backup.
I know, but does that why did they not play him? Is he hurt?
He was hurt, so
okay.
I didn't realize at that point either. So we
are. So you didn't do your research either.
No, I never do research. Yeah. That's just other than Jonathan Harrison. Anything related to Jonathan's, I guess that's the moral here. If there's a lineman named Jonathan, we probably didn't do our research. Everything else, though, we're very thorough. But yeah, 2 half sacks for Marshall. Hamilcar Rashed had a sack and a half. So defensive front was outstanding in this game.
We did kind of do our research about John Franklin Myers, who we called breakout season. So I've never heard him go by John.
He's John, though. He's not John.
Okay, that's a different. I thought the other thing, and this is, I think that a lot of people, and I'm not just saying this because of the preseason game. I just feel like in general that a lot of people are sleeping on the Jets. I don't think that they're going to be. I don't think they'll make the playoffs, but I think they'll be around 500. I think they'll win 7 games is what I would say. But when you look at, okay, how can this team get even better for next season? Obviously there's a lot of question marks right now that we're excited about, but they're all question marks between the youth and inexperience. But one spot in particular that is going to take this team to the next level is the tight end and the fullback position. Because you saw this offense looked a lot like Kyle Shanahan, a lot of 12 personnel. They used the fullback Wesco on a lot of plays. And the unit right now isn't anything special. I think you're right. Wesco actually did have a few very good reps, and he'll be a storyline I'll be interested to watch because he could carve out, a long-term role here in New York. I mean, if he impresses this year, he'll return next year. But I think the expectations for him are kind of low because he's not always been a natural fullback. But I thought he had some very good reps and some that he has to improve on. The tight ends, it looked like Ryan Griffin might be even the starting tight end, which isn't great. Croft, like you said, stumbled on that route, but I think he's probably the Jets' best bet in terms of doing everything okay. Herndon was playing with the third stringers, which isn't very encouraging. And then Yeboah, who is a guy that some people thought could maybe, if he impressed and flashed, could sneak onto the roster. Some people thought he could even start. brutal fumble. So I think he's probably a cut candidate. So anyways, the tight ends and the fullbacks are going to need to be revamped next offseason is what I would say. More so the tight ends. Verdict is still out on the fullbacks. What did you think of the tight ends, and what did you think of the Jets' usage of 12 personnel versus 11 personnel? I mean, again, it's preseason, so you can't take too much away, but it is our first real full look on how Mike LaFleur would call a game personnel-wise.
Yeah, it really seems like fullback is going to be a big part of it with Wesco in that role, which is interesting because he definitely does have the ability as a blocker. I think he's hit or miss. He's not perfect. He has some whiffs now and then, but I think there's definitely more good than bad on his tape, both last season and throughout his first two seasons and in this game. But as a receiver, it's just he doesn't seem to bring that much. I know when he was in college, and I even did an article on this a few months ago, but he broke a lot of tackles in college, had a lot of yak, and it does seem like a potential untapped ability that the Jets should look at more that they didn't the last 2 years. But just whenever he gets the ball, he is really seems like, it just doesn't have the athleticism to make plays with it. Doesn't have natural hands. He just has not looked like a good receiver in the NFL. But there are a lot of concepts where the Jets are running these bootlegs and these rollouts where, the fullback will fake the lead block and then come out with the quarterback into the flat. And he's going to get chances to make those plays, and he's going to have passes thrown his way. So it's definitely a little bit of a concern that they don't have a better fullback in terms of receiving ability, I think. But in the run game, I think he'll do okay.
Yeah, he is a former. I'm not as worried about Wesco. I mean, we'll give him the whole season. I think at the very least he's going to be okay. I think he's not going to be a nightmare at fullback. I mean, knock on wood, I can totally come back to bite
because
me.
you can work
tight ends are more concerning to me.
Yeah, you can work around the fact that he's not going to get too many targets, even probably 10 maximum 10 targets.
But he is a former tight end though. What I'm saying, he's not he's not an amazing pass catcher, but he has experience in a tight end role where he had to be more of a red zone threat and and win jump balls and stuff like that. You mentioned the yak stuff. So it's not like he's, I'm trying to think of a good example. He's not like he's John Connor, the former Jets fullback. It's like he has some receiving ability, even if it's bad for a tight end, it's mediocre for a fullback.
Yeah. So I think they could definitely try to next offseason find someone with a little more ability in terms of ball handling for that position. But in terms of the tight ends, I think it's just kind of going to be what we expect it to be. They're going to play their roles as blockers. Herndon will play his pass blocking role. Croft and maybe Griffin, it looks like, will be big in the run game, but they won't be heavily involved in the passing game, I wouldn't think, but it's definitely something long-term that you want to address because it can be such a big plus in this offense where there's such established blocking threats and they line up in line and they down block, and then you can work off of play action, roll them out, get them touches in the flat and let them make plays after the catch. There's a lot of opportunities to do that in this offense and just how many snaps they play, because it looks like they're going to do a lot of 21, with two tight ends on the field. So there's a lot of potential for tight ends in this offense. And obviously with the way the Jets are built, you don't necessarily want to lean targets towards Tyler Croft and Chris Herndon when those could go to Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, Mims, Crowder. When you have 5, maybe 6, if you include Barrios, wide receivers, even 7, maybe if you include Vincent Smith, that are probably better at wide receiver than your tight ends are in terms of pass catching. So I don't think they're going to be too involved, but they are going to be important. Their blocking is going to matter quite a bit. So I think we'll see. It looks like Griffin is going to be pretty involved. So I think we'll see a nice rotation between him, Herndon, and Tyler Croft. And Yeboah, like you said, probably not that one play puts you out of the mix, but when you are in the bubble like that, you just can't have those big mistakes like the fumble that Yeboah had. So he does seem like a pretty big long shot at this point.
Maybe a practice squad guy. I think I've absolutely, you and I both absolutely loved everything that the Jets have done this offseason from Robert Saleh on. I think the one thing that I would have loved for them to do, and I think they were actually in on him, and then maybe the price got too rich. Joe Douglas drew his line in the sand, but I would have loved Jonnu Smith, who we talked a lot about, who was great in Arthur Smith's offense and would have been a perfect fit here. Obviously, he's in New England now. Again, the Jets aren't a win now team, so they didn't need to fill every single hole. But I think he's a great young player, and that's the type of fullback the Jets are going to be looking for. Versatile guys. But look, we've been waiting for the Herndon breakout since 2018, but he's still on the roster. There's still 17 weeks for him plus preseason to put a stamp, on this roster and really make an impact. Like you said, I think Griffin and Croft will seem to be the first and second stringers. So we'll see how the Jets look at tight end. But I think that's going to be the biggest weakness of their offense, is that this offense is even deadlier if you really have threats at tight end where the defense has to pay attention to, like the 49ers do with George Kittle. You don't want to have, one-on-one matchup with the linebacker on George Kittle. You just don't. And against Ryan Griffin, you could probably leave your linebacker on him. So that's the difference there. I thought defensively, one of the things that stood out to me was just how fast the Jets look, which I don't think I've really ever said about the Jets. I mean, even going back to good Jets teams with Bart Scott and David Harris and Calvin Pace and Brian Thomas, and then even some like bad Jets teams like last year where you're watching Henry Anderson and Neville Hewitt and, fine players in their own right. But this Jets team is probably the fastest that I've seen. It's that all gas, no brake mantra really, he put his money where his mouth is, especially with Nasruddin and Sherwood when they came in, the two safeties that they've converted to linebacker. I mean, they just added a ton of speed at that position. Mosley didn't show any rust at all, which was a bit of a concern. I'm glad he played and was healthy and, had a pass deflection on the first play, got in on a few tackles. I mean, he looked good. Just the team speed as a whole, from the defensive line, obviously getting after the quarterback, but more so the linebackers in the secondary. I mean, everybody just looks like they're flying around the football. This defense, one preseason game, Mike Glennon's nothing special, but defense looks fast.
Yeah, the young linebackers definitely looked good in this game, but specifically Mosley, who started the game off, and he was having that Bills season opener type of pace to start the game. He had a pass deflection, he had run stuff, then he had a short pass that he tackled short of the first down marker. So he was just dominating to start the game, and it's great to see. He just shows up these pass deflections every practice. You hear a report of him breaking up a pass. At the green and white scrimmage, he came right out and did it on one of the first few plays. Then he comes out in the preseason, does it on the first play of the game. There's just too much consistency with how good he's been to think that he's not going to have a huge season this year, especially in coverage. So that speed really the lost weight seems to really be benefiting him. Having that more swiftness to complement his already good instincts is just making him really dangerous. Then the young linebackers, they really look nice in this game.
Combined for a fumble there.
Yeah, there's also that. But I think Sherwood looked good, and he dropped back, had a pass deflection. Hamza forced a fumble, and for the most part, they played their roles pretty well. There weren't too many huge mistakes in terms of where they should be. There were a couple. Nasruddin had this one play where the Giants ran an end around, and he kind of bit on the motion a little bit too much, gave up the edge. Bryce Huff also gave that up. Sherwood had a few bad angles in the run game later on, but for the most part, Sherwood did have some run stuffs too, and they both tackled really well. So for their first game, transitioning to linebacker, they definitely both got positive grades in this game.
Yeah, I think I know Nasruddin maybe got the official forced fumble, but Sherwood was in on that too. So that was cool to see both of the young linebackers in on that fumble. I think, like you said, Mosley looked good and limited action. I thought Carl Lawson, we've heard a lot about, only played 3 plays. One of them was a run play away from him, and the 2 other ones, he moved. He made some sort of pressure. I don't know if it counts as pressures in the stats sheet, but he looks good. You definitely saw the versatility of the pass rush moves that he has in different counters and whatnot. He should be a nightmare all season long. And I thought Bryce Huff on the other side of him, I think he's definitely earned his spot as a third down pass rushing specialist. I think Vinny Curry, I think you put this in one of your articles, might not have a spot when he comes back. And I think Huff is really going to be a big part of this wide 9 scheme that the Jets are running. But overall, through the linebackers and the secondary with the young corners, which is supposedly going to be the Jets' Achilles heel this year, I thought the corners looked good. Brandon Eccles had a really nice play on the ball, on a deep ball. Corey Ballantyne also had a nice play on a deep ball, though he did give up a touchdown where he looked like a 40-year-old dad at a flag football game. He just looked gassed at that point. But I thought as a whole, the secondary looked pretty good. Any last thoughts on the defense before we move? We have one more segment before we get out of here, but any last thoughts on the all gas, no break defense?
Yeah, I thought the secondary played good. And same thing applies here. You're playing not the best competition, but also this isn't necessarily supposed to be the best competition for the other side, all the Jets rookie cornerbacks. So I think it was even. But they came through and played really well, kind of continuing the trend we've seen throughout training camp that these young corners and just the secondary as a whole hasn't been as much of a liability as we thought it was going to be. And they came out in this game and played well. Guidry had a great pass deflection in the slot. Eccles had a great one on a deep post route. And then for the most part, all these young corners played a lot of snaps and they didn't give up catches. So even though you're not only a couple guys stand out with the big plays, it's just as good to be covering well enough to where you're not getting targeted and you don't get the chance to make big plays because your coverage is so good that the ball's not coming your way. There were a few guys who checked that box. Bless Austin in this game, to his credit, 7 snaps in coverage, no targets. So he escaped clean for one drive, just for a couple drives. So credit to him for that. Pinnock came in late in this game, 11 coverage snaps, no targets. Carter, 11 snaps, 1 target, which was incomplete. So a few guys were quietly good in addition to the ones who made plays. Ballantyne obviously had the 2 pass deflections, but he did give up the touchdown and he had penalty as well. So mixed bag for him. But other than that, the key guys, the 3 rookies, Carter the second, Eccles, and Pinnock, they did about as well as you could ask for them to do.
Yeah, Ballantyne coupled with his return skills, I think he's probably a practice squad guy. I don't think he makes the 53, but maybe a guy they try to stash there. One more thing, the special teams. Can't forget about them. I thought Braden Mann, in my opinion, had the best game he's had of his career.
Yeah.
I know you placed it second when we talked about this. You thought the punts were a little too straightforward line drives, not enough hang time, but did a good job pinning him deep. I thought he displayed that leg we were talking about, which he didn't really see at the green and white scrimmage, which he apparently struggled with. Chris, the kicker, really bad. I would say, especially only on that 53-yard field goal. I mean, that in itself, unless it got tipped or blocked or something, I mean, you can't roll into week 1 with that guy as your kicker. I thought Amendola on his 1 extra point looked all right, but we'll see what, I would imagine Amendola probably gets the start at kicker next week and they give him the majority of the game. I still think unless Amendola looks really good, I think they probably end up adding somebody. Borregales from Tampa Bay is the guy to keep an eye out for. But before we move to our last segment, your thoughts on the special teams unit?
Yeah, Braden Mann played good, and it was positive to see because I saw him in person at green and white, and he was frankly quite bad. But so to see him come back out at MetLife and play, like you said, probably I would say his week 5 game against the Cardinals, an instant classic. Turn on the tape. Everyone should remember that game. Like, who doesn't remember?
He got quite the work. He got quite the workload in that game.
Yeah, who doesn't remember Braden Mann against the Cardinals? It's like Michael Jordan's flu game. It's right up there. It's one of the classic performances. But I mean, it was definitely good. He put up. He had a couple of good distance punts, 58 and 53, I believe. Those ones weren't perfect because they were kind of line drive. There wasn't a lot of hang time, so there was 31 return yards between those 2 punts, which I believe one of them was not covered too well. There were some missed tackles, so that's not on him. But either way, you do want to. The farther you're kicking the ball, you need to have hang time with it, or you're just going to give back those yards through returns. So those were a little bit of line drives. So those weren't perfect, but still a couple of 50-plus yarders, still pretty good. But it was more so the precision punts, like on the Giants side of the field, that were impressive. He put 3 of them inside of the 20. He put one of the 13, had a fair catch at the 6, and obviously Vincent Smith with a fantastic play diving into the end zone. And then tossing the ball out of bounds near the pylon, which is a great play by the special teams guy. Fantastic play by Smith, but Mann still gave him a chance by dropping it in there with some touch. And it's something that he didn't do a lot of last year. So to see him drop 2 inside the 6-yard line was definitely impressive. So it has an argument to be the best game of his career. I think Cardinals last year was better. He had some good punts in that game, but this was a positive step up. Then kickers, Chris Nagar is just he's not good. I saw immediately the green white scrimmage when he was kicking, just warming up. It's like there's no pop on these guys' kicks. Even the ones he was making were the bottom half of the upright, barely going over the crossbar. And so this kick he missed in this game, even though it was a 53-yarder, which is tough, there's one thing, missing it is one thing, but missing it like that, where it doesn't have the distance or the accuracy is another thing. So Amendola has a huge leg up, but like you said, we'll see if he actually wins the battle or if they add someone else.
Yeah, I don't. Exactly. I was not to rush you there. I just feel like I asked you the question, but any conversation about the punting game is about 2 minutes too long there. But I agree with you. I think the other thing also outside of that, I thought Denzel Mims was interesting. He got some reps with the special teams. We're about to talk about him in a minute. But he's an interesting candidate there if he's not getting any snaps at wide receiver. He's a great blocker. He's athletic. I thought all the coverage teams did really well. I thought this was a really good start for the Jets. It was probably the biggest blowout 12-7 win I've ever seen. I never seemed like the Giants were really in it. The Jets dominated that game. Lot to improve, but I still thought I don't think it could have gone much better. I mean, obviously we would have loved a deep bomb from Zach Wilson or something like that, but as a whole, I'm very satisfied with how that game went, and we'll see how it looks when they ramp things up against Green Bay. The last segment on our show, and we were going to do a studs and duds, but honestly, there were so many studs in this game, and it was just where do you draw the line? And so we thought what would be interesting is, who has either from this game at the moment, because things can change, earned their way onto the roster or earned their way up the depth chart versus who has maybe lost their spot on the roster or is probably not going to make the roster because of their poor performance. We're going to call this earning their shoulder stripes. Love that. Like that, Michael? Yeah.
I call them the wings. I don't know why
they're not the wings. They're a contrail.
They're wings.
No, they're a contrail. What wings do you see that are facing each other, Michael? They're contrail.
It doesn't matter. They're shaped like wings.
Yeah. So. Well, I guess they kind of look like wings, but they're a contrail. But hey, speaking of which, uniforms look incredibly clean with Zach Wilson. We've been saying this. I even think Zach Wilson might make me like the green on green just because the baggy jersey that Darnold was wearing, the 14, because the one didn't take up enough space. So it was not, centered. He had the baggy sleeves. So then the contrail looked weird. It was like the plane was crashing into the ground because it was like sloped and then down. And then the New York would get all squiggly. It looked like to be honest, Darnold looked terrible in the uniforms. And he wore black cleats. Zach Wilson's got an incredible amount of drip. The headband, incredible. White shoes. The number 2 looks clean. I don't know why there was a lot of number 2 slander. I thought, this is a side note, but I thought the uniforms looked great last night. And they wore the green socks. Michael, last year they wore white on green with white socks. The year before that's white, green, and green. So these are the riveting storylines that we want to get to. But uniforms look great last night.
Yep, they did.
As far as they're earning their shoulder stripe goes, I think we can start with Bryce Huff, and I'll throw 2 of them in their same position. Bryce Huff and this one's a bit of a surprise, Hamilcar Rashed. I think, when you look at how deep this Jets defensive line is, well, they're going to have to make some tough decisions this year. I mean, they haven't really had to make tough decisions in the past. I think they're going to have to let go of a few good players, or at least a few developmentally promising players, or maybe players that they invested in. I think Bryce Huff's a no-brainer. He's obviously making it. He might even be a starter at this point, or at the very least, a starter on third downs. So we don't really have to talk much about him. But Hamilcar Rashed had a great game. Obviously, things can change. He has to, if he balls out against the Packers like he did in this game, I think they keep him, and I think maybe they cut Zuniga. I mean, although they invested a 3rd-round pick, it's a different coaching staff. It's hard to find a role for him. He really just doesn't flash at all. You want to be patient with him. I think they cut him and try to stash him on the practice squad because in order for them not to, somebody has to sign him to their active roster. And maybe there's a team that loved him in the pre-draft process or something. But if you're just going to put right now the best 53 guys, Zuniga's not on that list. Let's be honest about it. And there's a lot of really tough decisions they're going to have to make. And you can only keep a certain amount of, okay, this guy's a developmental project. Like Cameron Clark's an example of that, where maybe he'll play a little bit this year, but he's a guy you're developing. I don't think you can keep him and Zuniga and James Morgan. You can't just keep keeping all these guys because you drafted them. It's a different coaching staff. I think Zuniga might be the first Joe Douglas draft pick to go because Hamilcar Rashed looked really good.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess we can talk about Zuniga here as one of the guys who lost their shoulder wings. But
Contrail. Come on.
All right. Contrail. But yeah, Zuniga in this game I guess he was bad. Like people don't really call edge rushers bad because they don't really make mistakes. but it's just, if the reps pile up and you're not making any good plays, then you are playing bad. And in this game, he had zero pressures, he had zero run stops, and he missed a tackle. So, and he didn't play a lot. He had 9 pass rush snaps and I think only 3 against the run, but
He just doesn't create any
he didn't do
push.
anything. He doesn't do anything. And he didn't do anything last year. He had 1 pressure in 8 games. We know he's a great athlete. It's just the skill isn't there. Just the hands, the ability to get leverage, to get underneath the guy's pads and push him back. There's just nothing there that we've seen. So it would be warranted at this point. If he doesn't do anything in the next 2 games, then it definitely would be warranted if they went with Hamilcar over him, because Hamilcar is flashing and he's literally not even, it's a complete fact. In this game, he did more than Zuniga has done. And this is now 9 appearances as a Jet. So, and that's barely over half season. So it is a little bit early, but this is a stacked defensive line. You're going to have to make these tough decisions. Are you going to, like you said, continue to bank on a guy who's a project when you have other guys who are producing more? It's a decision you have to make. And if this weren't as deep of a group, you could have that bias towards one of your own draft picks, just develop them, keep them around, give them more time. But they have tough decisions to make because they have so many guys who are flashing and playing well. So it's tough for these guys with the draft pedigree advantage to actually play off of that advantage and make the roster when they're not doing anything. So Zuniga has been very quiet and needs to do something soon.
Yeah, and by the way, Saturday was his birthday, so he turned 24 years old. So it's, and Hamilcar is 23. So they're both young players. Zuniga a little older. I get that you don't want to have to lose an investment, but he's a bit of a sunk cost in the sense that you don't want to keep him in hopes that maybe someday he pops, when you have a guy like Hamilcar who has been popping throughout training camp and on Saturday. Another guy, and look, this could all change, and maybe they do keep him. I think he gets cut and stashed in the practice squad. I think he makes it to the practice squad. But another guy who may have earned his way onto the roster and could bounce somebody off the roster who probably deserves to make it, I think Vincent Smith, there's a very good chance he makes the roster. I mean, he was getting reps with the ones. He was certainly ahead of Denzel Mims in the depth chart. I think the coaching staff loves the skill set he brings. We know Joe Douglas loves him. I think he was one of the first players that Joe Douglas ever brought in. Made a couple of nice plays tonight or Saturday. I don't know why I said tonight. I think, the problem with him, and Connor Hughes has been having him in his 53-man roster predictions, but he's having the Jets keep 7 receivers. And I don't know if I see the Jets keeping 7. I think they probably keep 6. So if they're going to keep Vincent Smith, then I think Denzel Mims is going. No, I'm just kidding. I think Braxton Berrios is gone in that case. And there's no way they're cutting Denzel Mims. I think I could see them valuing Vincent Smith and cutting Berrios. And look, they even had Keelan Cole returning punts, although Berrios was hurt. But Cole at least showed he could fulfill the role. Berrios is very strictly a slot receiver. He's a guy who flashed all of OT as a mini camp. He's made a few plays in training camp. We haven't heard him, and now he's injured. I don't know. Unless the Jets are going to keep 7 receivers, Vincent Smith is certainly flashing and getting reps at the ones.
Yeah, he's a guy to keep an eye on. And I think there's an aspect of his game that makes him a good fit in this offense. And it's that ability to be a threat as on an end arounds, things like that. Because we saw that in 2019. He scored the 1 touchdown against the Eagles on that sort of play. And I believe he had 2 other big gains on end around handoffs in 2019. So that's something that he brings to the table. He has good straight line speed, and that's useful in this offense. So he could be deployed in that sort of role. And obviously he's been on the field early. He was playing with in the first quarter in this game with Zach Wilson. So he definitely has a chance. And the fact that he can return kickoffs is a plus, because Corey Ballantyne is probably in addition to Smith, the most experienced and best option at kickoff returner on this team. And he's probably not making it because of how deep cornerback is. And it's going to be hard for him to beat out all those rookies and draft picks. So that would leave Vincent Smith as the best kickoff return option. So he could make it. That's a big part of how he can make the team as well. So Vincent Smith for sure, I think, could make the team. But it will be interesting to see if they go 7, keep both these guys. Berrios has another pure slot guy in addition to Crowder. And you have Elijah Moore and Keelan Cole can play slot, but Berrios kind of brings that similar body type to Crowder, smaller guy who could, and more smaller guy who you could feature on screens. He made some plays in limited opportunities last year. He's been solid as a punt returner. So will they go 7, keep both those guys, or will it be one or the other? That will be interesting to watch.
Yeah, most of us assumed Barrios was going to be gone when Moore got taken. It was then just Barrios who dominated all of OTAs and minicamp. And look, he has made plays when he's been in. I actually think Barrios is a good player. I'm pretty high on him. I mean, as high as you can be on Braxton Berrios. I think he'll get cut and he'll sign probably with New England somewhere else. He'll play meaningful snaps. He'll be a slot receiver somewhere else, and he's going to have success. I mean, that's just the way that this business goes. I don't know who I would choose in terms of them. I think Vincent Smith gives you more flexibility and versatility, and if they like him, I could see it happening. We'll see. Or maybe they keep 7, but then they're going to have to make a tough cut somewhere else. The other guy who certainly earned their shoulder stripe, and I don't think his roster spot was ever in jeopardy, but I think he proved that he definitely deserves more reps with at least the 2s, if not the 1s. Denzel Mims, who had the play of the night, carrying the entire Giants defense on his back, fighting for 18 yards and getting the first down. Dispelling the myth that he's not a good yak receiver. Michael, you had a great article on this earlier in the summer that he actually is, in fact, a great yards after catch receiver, and that would make him a good fit in this offense, in addition to all the jump ball possession stuff that he brings you. It did come out this week that it was food poisoning with Denzel Mims, that he dropped 20 pounds, reportedly salmon, reportedly from the Jets facility, which isn't a good look, although I don't think anybody else got food poisoning, so maybe he just got a bad fish, but, I'd love to see. He's playing right now at 208. Apparently, he was 217 when he ate the salmon, and then he dropped to 197 last year. I think he's listed at 207. So he's basically the weight he was at last year. It's interesting to me that he was at 217. Maybe the Jets wanted to bulk up a little bit more, be more of a Corey Davis or these are obviously not direct comparisons, but an AJ Brown or a DK Metcalf, a bigger receiver to fit his physical style of play. But I mean, damn, at 208 pounds, he's certainly still a physical player. That play, in my eyes, showed that he definitely deserves reps with the 1s. What did you think of Denzel Mims' performance and silencing all the haters?
Yeah, he definitely made the most of the opportunities he got. I really like the fact that he revealed after the game that him playing on special teams was his own call, that he was on the special teams depth chart, but like 3rd team special teams, and he wanted them to push him up so he can get an opportunity. And he actually looks pretty good in special teams, but obviously that's not what they drafted Denzel Mims to do. But he made the most of his plays in this game. That play was incredible. That was definitely the best, I would say, the best individual effort on the team in this game. It was definitely
Corey Ballantyne on that allowed touchdown is a close second.
a close second, very, very close. But that was just a great effort, and it's not really anything new. I think that's the biggest thing about it. It's not like it's oh look, he can do yak all of a sudden. Like, he made a lot of plays, obviously not as good as that one, but the first part of that play where he catches the ball and then kind of cuts it back, brings it around, loses a few yards so he can gain a few. He did that a couple times last year and had success with it in the Dolphins game, the Patriots game, the Monday night one. So the plays like that, he made quite a few of them last year. So it was good to just see him come out and do it on the big stage, while some people were doubting whether he could make that kind of play. And even the one before that, where he caught the ball on a quick out and then turns it up the field, lowers his shoulder, trucks the corner, past the first down marker. So we saw 2 great yak plays from him in this game. He ended up with 51 yards to lead the game. 30 of them were after the catch. Across his 3 catches on 4 targets. So he was efficient, gained yards after the catch, and showed he could be the type of receiver that can play in this offense. And it was 3 catches, but he made the most of it. And I did spend part of the game focusing on his releases off the line, which, you can't see the whole route on TV, but you can at least see his release off the line. He had some good releases. He was defeating the hands of the corner, swatting them away and getting them to the point where he had the leverage to where he can make the break he's trying to make, whether it was an in-breaking route or an out-breaking route. He had a couple of good routes, even where he wasn't targeted. So on-field performance for Mims in this game was pretty good. So we'll see how the depth chart changes as a result of it.
Yeah, another guy, sub 1 in, sub 1 out. As far as earning their shoulder stripe, Mike White. As far as losing theirs, James Morgan. I don't think James Morgan gets cut. I mean, same thing with Jabari Zuniga, the whole developmental issue. I think it's different with the quarterback. they invested a 4th-round pick in. I think Morgan probably stays on the team. I mean, how many teams would sign James Morgan to their active roster, though? That is a fair question. They probably could sneak him on the practice squad. I don't think there's many teams that would cut their backup in order to sign him. So maybe James Morgan does get the axe and gets brought back as the practice squad quarterback. Mike White, I mean, look, none of these quarterbacks are special. If Zach Wilson goes down, the Jets are certainly in trouble. But I think it wouldn't be as much of a shit show with Mike White. I thought at times he looked in control. He missed a few throws, wasn't amazing. But I thought he had showed good control of the offense. So I thought Mike White made a case that, hey, I'm QB number 2 around here. And I think heading into this game, I thought that Mike White was a lock to get cut because I just figured either you're not going to keep him and Morgan. You probably keep Morgan. If you're going to go 3 quarterbacks, you're going to have a veteran, a real veteran, not Mike White. But although I guess Mike White is now in his 3rd season, Michael, so maybe he is a veteran. But I guess
with no regular season games.
You're right. It's a little different with no regular season games, but I thought Mike White looked out of the 2 much better.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He was there was pretty much nothing special about what he did, but he was in good command of the offense. And that's, I think, the most you want out of your backup, especially in an offense like this one. Just hit those throws in the flat at the time you're supposed to hit them. Just hit those quick outs. Don't make mistakes. And I think for the most part he did that. And he wasn't great. He did have a couple misses, but he's better than Morgan, who had some easy throws that he missed on, even ones that were completed. There was one he threw in the flat that was too high and cost the receiver some yak. There was one he threw to Ryan Griffin where it was out too early. It was too hot, too high, and Griffin couldn't come up with it. So it was his first NFL game, so you cut him some slack for that. But he definitely looked very erratic in this one, whereas White was the steadier presence, which you would expect. But also White has previously struggled in the preseason. He's played a lot, 8 preseason games, and mostly struggled with the Cowboys. So he took a step forward in this one, and maybe he's making some improvement in his 4th NFL season. So White definitely took a step forward.
Hey, James Morgan is going to be in his hometown. He's going to be going up against his childhood team. I would imagine a lot of his friends and family are going to be at this Packers preseason game. So maybe he balls out and wins back that number 2 spot. But for right now, Mike White's certainly ahead of him. A few more here. We'll combine them. I thought Jonathan Marshall and Michael Dwumfor, 2 guys. I mean, Marshall is a drafted rookie, so you'd imagine he'd make the team. Dwumfor was pretty much an afterthought, more of a practice squad guy. I still think I don't think there's space for him on the roster, but both guys had great games. I certainly think Dwumfor at least earned a spot on the practice squad, and Marshall, solidified his spot on the active roster. And hell, maybe he pushes for some reps. Maybe he can be on the active game day roster, but for right now, we'll just keep him on the 53. And then the last stud, we have a few duds to get through. Javelin Guidry had continued a strong camp. And it seems like at the beginning of camp, Michael Carter II was the incumbent slot corner. And it seems like not really that Carter II lost the role, but more that Guidry just took it from him. Guidry's had a really good camp, and that continued on Saturday.
Yeah, the pass deflection that he made, just used his inside hand, punched right in between the 2 hands of the receiver, knocked the ball out. That was a really good play by him. And he's made a lot of plays, or at least according to the reports, has made a lot of plays in camp recently. Carter II hasn't gotten as much buzz, which is usually a good thing for a cornerback, like we talked about. You don't have to be making plays at corner to be playing well, which Carter II did in this game, like I mentioned earlier. Covered on 11 snaps, 1 target, no catches. But Guidry in this one, same exact line, pretty much 7 snaps in coverage. Just had that 1 target, and he deflected it. So Guidry has continued to build some momentum as he tries to win that slot corner role. And I think it makes the most sense. He is more experienced. He played last year, played pretty well. And it makes sense to allow them to compete because he's fairly inexperienced himself. But I think Guidry played well last season, deserves to win this role, and he's seems to be on the way to proving that he does deserve it. And Carter II can focus on special teams, whereas at his very good speed can make an impact. And he can be a versatile backup who can play different roles, even has some safety experience, could be valuable in that way to start out. But obviously there still is some more time for that to play out.
And then there's a few guys who lost their shoulder stripe. We'll start with Dan Feeny. I thought he was the worst, I thought he had the worst game out of all these guys for the Jets. I mean, the exact, I think it was 9 total pressures he gave up last night. Is that correct? I
I don't
saw it
think
somewhere.
I don't think it was that many,
Maybe
but
not nine pressures, maybe 9 missed blocks or so. I know it was nine, something like that. I mean, you're the analytics nerd here, not me. But obviously, you could just we know that Dan Feeny had a pretty terrible game in general, probably the worst offensive lineman that was out there. Maybe a guy like Corey Levin steals his spot. It seems like Feeny, given that he was not like a huge free agent deal, but he was given a good amount of guaranteed money. Seems like he was going to be a lock to make the team. Maybe he still is. Seems like a good locker room guy, obviously at the Rangers games, crushing cans and whatnot. But I think, I'd be more comfortable with Corey Levin in there. I'd love to see Cam Clark in one of these preseason games, but Feeny was pretty awful in this game.
yeah, he was just missing one block after the next. And I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but definitely when we were watching it was just time again. If a play didn't work out, Feeny was a big part of it, and he played a lot in this game. He played 31 snaps in pass protection, which was the most on the entire team. So he got a lot of reps, even beyond just the first team. And it didn't matter what unit he was playing with, he was still pretty bad. So the depth of this offensive line is now a plus at tackle with either Moses or Fant being the backup there. But on that interior, still have some question marks with that depth. I know Feeny was a starter the past few years, but I don't know if he's playing for you. I don't necessarily consider him better than most other backups in the league. He just consistently struggled with the Chargers past few years more than pretty much any starter. He gave up the most pressures among interior linemen over the past 2 years. And we saw some of that tonight. So once AVT gets back, it's going to be so much fun to watch him and Becton work together, because we were watching plays where it was like, if Feeny could have or the left guard could have just hit that block, maybe things would play out differently, like that 4th-and-1 that they didn't convert. And Becton was playing really well in this game. He was getting out to the second level, pinning linebackers, and on the edge, he was kicking guys out. And then Feeny just wasn't cutting it at left guard. He had a couple nice plays, but for the most part, had a lot of misses. And, you're just thinking, if Elijah Vera Tucker can be there, a guy who is just a great technician, has a high floor coming into the league, it's hard to picture him being really bad. Maybe he doesn't come in right away and, flatten people and become a dominant player, but he should be really consistent. And if he can just do that, and you Becton next to him, and you have McGovern to his right, who blocked well in this game and is a talented, athletic guy, then there's a lot of potential with that offensive line with Vera Tucker in there.
Yeah, the other guy who definitely lost his place in the roster, even though I don't think he really had a chance. Though he's made some plays in training camp. Austin Walter, the running back, had a few rough plays in there. Maybe he can stick at the practice squad, but obviously he had the one play where he slipped, got up and fumbled. He had another one where he caught a pass from James Morgan, slipped, originally didn't pick up the first, but the second effort after Rob Saleh challenge showed he got the first. Pretty rough game from him. Another young offensive player, Kenny Abo, who we talked about earlier, had a fumble. So 2 guys there who probably best case scenario for them now is to make the practice squad.
Yeah, you feel bad watching it, because obviously these guys are so talented for them to even be in this position. And just to see immediately as soon as Walter slipped and then fumbled that ball, that any small chance he might have had of even making the practice squad maybe just evaporated right there. So it's tough to watch, but that's just what the NFL is. When you're in that position, you can't make any mistakes. You got to be flawless to put yourself in that position. And both of those guys made big mistakes in this game that give them a pretty much insurmountable climb over the next couple of games to make this roster or even the practice squad.
And that's going to do it for our earned and lost shoulder contrails, I guess I should say.
You went stripes.
Well, earn your stripes. That was the pun came. But overall, Michael, I was very happy with how this game turned out.
Yeah.
I think next week is a much bigger test. I'm really excited to see those joint practices. It's almost like 3 different games for the Jets against a very good team, a better team than the Giants, a team that will most likely be playing their starters. We'll get to see Becton, Moses in practice at least go up against the Smith brothers, hopefully in the game. You'll see Zach Wilson face more pressure. Maybe the Jets give him a little longer of a leash, let him go through more progressions, let him roll it out a little bit more, or less designed rollouts, more creating something out of nothing. But I like their game plan for him in game one, and they should probably continue that throughout his rookie season. But I'd like to see a little bit more Zach Wilson magic as with every week as he gets more reps under his belt. But I don't think this game could have gone much better. I mean, just a completely different vibe with Robert Saleh running the stands before the game, and he looks like a head coach in the sidelines, which is go back to 2 years ago, Michael, when we were first starting this podcast, and we were talking about Adam Gase, doing smelling salts on the sideline, and how that fired us up. But no, it didn't. I mean, we were like, this is a certified maniac. The Jets actually have a legitimate head coach, somebody that you yourself, and you can understand why players would want to sit in front of, would want to listen to. I loved his message after the game, which is go home, sit in a dark room and watch your tape and see what you get from it. So yeah, I mean, like you said, Michael, I mean, they checked the box. Step one for this Jets team is accomplished. They got a lot more to go. This is far from a victory lap, but I thought step one, all right, we can check that box. We can move on to the Packers week. And then obviously, I don't know how they'll handle all the preseason reps, but this might be the dress rehearsal. Maybe the Eagles game. I don't know how many reps the starters will get in that. Maybe they do ramp it up like a usual preseason game, and this is a half for Zach Wilson, and the Eagles game is a full, 3/4 or whatever. Or maybe this is the practice run for Zach. He gets a first half, and then the third game is all backups. Who knows how they'll manage this, but this is certainly going to be a big game and a heavy game for all the starters. And obviously those joint practices, as we were saying, they'll be using regular season concepts. I remember this time, Michael.
There you go.
Throughout practice. So really excited about all this. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. You can follow myself at Ben W. Blessington, Michael at Michael_Nania, JetsXFactor.com for the best Jets content out there. Please rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Helps the pod out a lot. Michael, any last words before we get out of here?
I do just want to talk about the Robert Saleh quote that you mentioned, where he talked. There's just a video of him talking to the locker room after the game, and it's his position where coaches always say, the same exact quote, just in a different way, like, great job, keep working hard, keep grinding, just whatever, all the same exact stuff you hear all the time. And I feel like that's just it's just talk. It's pointless, and players don't really get anything out of it. But what Saleh said, like you said, he said, go home, watch your tape, and tell yourself what that says about you, how you can get better, something along those lines. But, he said, just told him, go home, watch your tape, and get better from it. That's something that a player can actually listen to and be like, you know what, I'm going to go do that. And some players might not have been planning to do that, might have been planning to take their off day to be off and just take a rest. But maybe that changed their mind a little bit. I just feel like that is a microcosm of his advanced thinking in terms of just philosophically how he's a leader. And it's just something that is more impactful, and I think is, something that players can listen to that's applicable, something that they could actually take and use instead of just the same cliches that don't mean anything. So I really like that aspect of him.
100%. Everybody, all Jets fans, enjoy a Victory Monday. We'll be back on I actually think we'll be back on Friday this week. We'll go back to the Thursday schedules in the future, but we'll be back on Friday this week previewing the Packers game. Obviously, a lot of fun stuff to talk about there. We'll be talking about the joint practices, but everybody enjoy Victory Monday. A great first step for Robert Saleh and company. Have a great week. Go Jets.